Welcome to this UK Biobank training module on code repositories. My name is Bruce Dickey and I am a data engineer for UK Biobank, and I will be presenting this module. In this short course, we will give you some tips on how to use code repositories in an appropriate way, maintaining data security while still enabling you to get full use of your code. Code repositories are an increasingly important element of a researcher's toolbox, enabling efficient code management, seamless sharing, and effective collaboration. Applying best practices in code repository management ensures your code is securely backed up and version controlled while still maintaining secure data handling. UK Biobank researchers need to be aware of the potential problems that can occur when working with code repositories, how to avoid them, and the process they need to go through if a mistake is made. UK Biobank is fully committed to open science practices and to the sharing of knowledge and expertise built using the data it supports, including the sharing of code amongst the research community. UK Biobank and all its researchers have a duty of care to safeguard the data it holds, to ensure its availability to all who wish to use it in the longer term. As a UK Biobank researcher, you have the responsibilities as laid out in your Material Transfer Agreement, also known as an MTA, to ensure that you uphold the highest standards of data security, and this also extends to your use and sharing of code which analyzes or processes UK Biobank data. The aim of this short course is to give you some brief guidance on best practices for using code repositories when working with UK Biobank data. During this session, we will cover a brief introduction to using code repositories, best practices that you should apply when working with health research data and code repositories, and where and how to get advice and support from UK Biobank, especially if you make a mistake whilst using a repository. So, what is a code repository? A code repository is essentially a storage solution for code. They are commonly used by programmers and developers, but are a useful tool for scientists who run their own data analysis using specific code, with common examples including GitHub, GitLab, and Bitbucket. These repositories can be public or private, and it is important you know which type you are using. Using a repository has a number of benefits. These include being a safe storage space for code with structured backups, version control to easily keep track of changes and be able to link code versions to the analyses you have run, increasing the reproducibility of your research, and sharing code to be more open in exchanging knowledge and experience with other researchers and allow for easier collaboration. When submitting research publications, reviewers will often ask for code to be supplied. This, along with the need to maintain your code as a researcher and to share with others, means that committing code to a repository is a good practice. On our community pages, we have links to external tutorials to support you in learning the basics of using code repositories, primarily focused on GitHub. Committing your code to a repository, however, must be done in a careful and controlled manner, especially when working with participant-level data or data from other cohorts. When you are working with individual-level data, you need to be vigilant about how you work with that data, knowing exactly where it is stored, who has access, and where analysis results are maintained. Issues arise when code and data, whether raw or derived, become mixed. You need to make sure that your data and code are stored separately, with, for example, your code directly referencing the data during an analysis step, or if extracts of the data are output within the code itself, such as in Jupyter notebooks or R history files. Importantly, health research data may be classed as sensitive for several reasons. But for UK Biobank data, you must remember that you are working with data which relates to specific individuals who must not be identified under any circumstances. Therefore, it is important to not add any elements of the data into your code, as this raises the risk of you inadvertently releasing the data and making it accessible to others. So, when you add your code to a repository, known as committing code, you must check that you have no elements of your data in your code, including within data output files. Let's explore a short scenario. JD is a researcher who is part of a large consortium project across Europe investigating disease susceptibility. JD's group has access to UK Biobank data, but only shares analysis code with other members of the consortium, as not all partners have access to the data. As part of a code update, JD adds a few lines to exclude some specific participants. They don't quite fit the current study design, so JD adds their identifiers to the code to make sure they are removed. Another researcher in the project wants to take a look at JD's code. JD hastily commits the code to a shared repo on GitLab and then realizes they have not removed the patient identifiers. What should JD do? Let's remind ourselves of some best practices for working with code repositories. The first thing you need to be aware of is whether you are using a public or private repository. Whether public or not, you still need to adhere to the same good data practices, but it's worth being aware of who might have access to your code in case of mistakes. Remember, only researchers listed on your project should have access to UKB data. When you go to commit code to a repository, there are several checks you should go through before doing so. Never commit access credentials. Make sure there are no access details in your code. This includes, but is not limited to, passwords, keys, and tokens. Look at what you are about to commit. Check exactly what code is going to be committed and make sure that you remove anything that looks like data. It is good practice to review the changes made before committing to a repository. Use Git features such as gitignore. Gitignore is a feature that allows you to pre-choose folders, files, file types, or file naming patterns that you want to make sure do not automatically get considered for version control. Another useful feature is Git hooks. This feature will enable you to create an automated scan that can run through prior to your commit being executed to do a check for anything that should not have been added. Code examples for gitignore and Git hooks, as well as tips on implementing them for working with UK Biobank data, can be found on our community portal. As a final reminder, please do check your code for any data that you may have included by mistake, such as participant identifiers, like our encoded IDs, and never commit any raw data files. To help you further in implementing these best practices, we've broken down the items you need to consider at each stage of your project. At project initialization, we recommend that researchers start out with a private repository and only allow researchers on your UK Biobank project to access it whilst it is still private. Create a gitignore file and then dedicate a folder to store any private data, whether it is raw or processed, and add that folder to your gitignore file, ensuring none of the contents get committed by accident. At project development, always be sure to follow the best practices detailed previously, even when you're committing to a private repository. At project completion, before making your repository public or open source, download and run the UK Biobank Git audit tool into your local repository. The tool can be found in the UK Biobank GitHub organization under the Git Audit Tool repository's latest releases. The UK Biobank Audit Tool scans through your commit history and flags for review any files that might contain patient identifiers. After reviewing all the files, proceed with making your repository publicly available. What to do if you make a mistake? If you do make a mistake and commit code to a repository which contains UK Biobank data, don't panic and let UK Biobank know immediately. Provide clear details as to what was uploaded, when this occurred, who the principal investigator or lead collaborator is for the project, and any other appropriate contact details. The UK Biobank team will then respond as soon as possible with instructions on what to do next to resolve this issue. Telling us as soon as the mistake happens enables us to work together to minimize any potential data security risks and maintain the highest level of data safeguarding we can. Remember, our priority here as a community is to ensure the integrity and security of the participant data that we hold. So, going back to our researcher JD, who made a mistake by uploading something they shouldn't have. They contacted UK Biobank and let them know what happened. The team at UK Biobank checked the repository and told them exactly what they needed to do to rectify the situation. The UKB team also recommended some useful methods such as gitignore to prevent this from happening again. Not disclosing a potential data security breach has a number of consequences. If we find them without prior disclosure from you, this is classed as a breach of your MTA, and this could result in the termination of your project and other projects at your institute. This is important because our participants' data is precious, and actions such as these may result in the potential for misuse of the data by individuals or organizations who should not have access to this data. We have systems in place that are checking code repositories constantly for potential data breaches. If you want to share something to your repository and you are unsure if it is appropriate to share, get in contact with us and we can help you decide how best to include it. Code repositories are an excellent tool for enabling you as a researcher to manage, store, and share your code. If you're working with UKB data, you need to make sure you keep code and data separated in order to reduce the potential for data breaches. Run through our checklist before you commit your code. Manually inspect what code you are committing, and use tools such as gitignore and githooks to make sure there is nothing missed in the code which should not be shared. If you share something by mistake, tell us straight away so we can work together to minimize any potential impact. We encourage all researchers to take a look at the community portal for additional resources where you can find how-to guides, code snippets, and links to Git tutorials, as well as to engage in the open forums to share your knowledge and experiences. Managing your code responsibly is just as important as writing it well. If you're ever unsure, reach out. We're here to help.